Hand and Killer7 was a book that was released by Grasshopper Manufacture to share some additional information and some artwork related to Killer7. And of course, since Killer7's story is told in a very vague manner, additional information was welcome. And the things that Hand has to say does answer some questions about the story. It also creates some questions as well. It's not to say that if you read through Hand and Killer7 that you're just suddenly going to understand everything and everything will just make sense and wonderful. It's not really like that. It's not so much that everything is going to be just totally clear after reading Hand, but it does give us a good deal of information that is not actually in the game. And you've been seeing some of that information so far in the reports that have been at the end of each of these videos. Those reports are from Hand and Killer7, and we'll eventually go through all of those, and we will eventually go through all of the pages in the book. We're not going to do that right now because many of the pages do have spoilers on them in terms of the images and the information that they have, things that we have not seen in the game yet, so we won't look inside the book just yet. Now, Hand was published in Japanese, and only in Japanese. There was no English release of the book, but there was a translation done, and that's what I've been using for the reports, and that's what I'm going to be using right now. The translation I found on the website deltaheadtranslation.com. It's what I've been using to read this book. Even though I have the book in front of me, it isn't all in Japanese, so I can't actually read the physical book. So, what we're going to look at right now, or rather what we're going to listen to right now, is a story, an article that can be found in Hand and Killer7. This article is titled, Study Article on Multifoliate Personae Phenomenon. So, let's read what this has to say, and maybe it'll shed some light onto what exactly the Killer7 are and what Harman Smith is capable of doing. Let's listen. Study Article on Multifoliate Personae Phenomenon by Jack Foley. Neurologist Graham McAllister's body was found 23 years after his disappearance from his professional and social circles. His death is a mystery. The following article, His Professional Legacy, was published in the monthly magazine Spreading the Truth, August 1998. I first met Harman Smith in 1975. I had driven to Seattle to visit my old colleague, Dr. John Gibbon, who practiced clinical psychology in the area. When I rolled through downtown, it was already very late. I felt a premonition. Something deadly. Dark is what the premonition was. To complicate matters, my naturally bad sense of direction caused me to become lost in the city. I ended up in a back alley, and I met Harman Smith. He was in trouble. Someone had stolen his car. Later, I learned that the car belonged to Harman's companion, Christopher Mills. When Harman and Mills saw my car crawling down the alley, they forced their way into the passenger and back seats. I should have panicked. I should have run from the carjackers. But I didn't. I allowed their presence. Maybe it's because of my premonition. Some dark fate I knew I could never escape. I surely would have fled had I known what was in their luggage. A stiff corpse. They told me in the car that they had nowhere to stay the night. I pitied them, and I let them stay in my hotel room. They removed the corpse from the bag and told me that they needed to hide in my room for the night to avoid pursuers. When I saw the body, my face palled. I boiled with self-loathing at my foolish invitation for them to stay the night. My recrimination quelled, though, after I saw their ritual. Curiosity and inquiry. How much human despair has grown from these tendencies? The ritual concluded by Harman absorbing the corpse into his own body. When Harman focused his mind, the corpse changed into thousands of small particles. Harman's body then absorbed these particles. Harman's middle-aged body then transformed, and he took on all of the physical features of the absent corpse. Harman more than resembled the man, he became the man. Woo! The man who he became, his name was Dan, insulted me a few times. Then Dan turned into those small particles again, and Harman returned before my eyes. I had witnessed a true phenomenon. In my excitement, I asked Harman for specific descriptions of his methods. I thought I'd begun to annoy him with my questions. Instead of shutting me out, though, Harman smiled. He held up a hand to silence me. A normal person would have fled at the sight of the phenomenon, but my abnormal curiosity intrigued him. The notes that he allowed me to take read as follows. 1. He can only absorb corpses that meet unknown requirements for compatibility. 2. When Harman's consciousness recognizes that a corpse is compatible with Harman, the corpse transforms into thousands of small particles, which Harman's body absorbs. 3. Incredibly, the absorbed body exists within Harman, with its own personality completely intact. 4. When a persona becomes manifested, Harman's physical form changes completely, as it did when he transformed into the late Dan. Additionally, Harman's mental qualities change too, adopting the total personality associated with the body. 5. In addition to Dan, the persona whose corpse had been absorbed in my presence, another persona exists within Harman. That persona is named Garcian. The situation bore similarities to dissociative identity disorder, in which the patient completely changes his personality. For readers of this article who are unfamiliar with dissociative identity disorder, I should explain that it is a severe mental problem. In it, the patient creates a new identity for himself. The new identity is severed consciously from the patient's original identity. Through the new identity, the patient loses contact with the original identity's perception, self-awareness, and memory. The similarities do not mean that Harman's condition is identical to dissociative identity disorder, though. A patient with multiple personalities only manifests the new identities. Harman actually morphs into the other identity's body. Needless to say, the creation of a physically new person in time and space is rare in any field of medicine. Further, in most cases of dissociative identity disorder, the multiple personalities are created when the patient believes them to exist outside of himself. A patient may have a personality named John and another named Eric. John and Eric believe that each exists in another body apart from each other. This is not so with Harman. In his case, or rather in their case, the separation of the spirit creates a new body. In most dissociative identity disorder patients, the different identities, or personae, pile up inside the patient. They stack on top of the one before, burying the original identity, or persona, at the bottom. In Harman Smith, the personae all exist parallel to each other. Their identities and their bodies keep their individuality, yet they are bound to each other. I call this the multifoliate personae phenomenon. The next day, I begged Harman to hire me as his private physician, even though I knew that he was a professional assassin working with the criminal underworld. Harman Smith granted my wish. I never met with Dr. Gibbon. As a scholar, it has been my duty to document and understand the multifoliate personae phenomenon. During my study of Harman Smith, I learned that he can absorb adult men, and also women and children. If Harman tries to absorb a body, and if his consciousness rejects it as incompatible, the personality becomes a phantom. I named the rejected personae remnant psyches. I will describe the remnant psyches in detail in a future essay. Writing all of this down was like drafting my own will. It is suicidal to betray Harman's trust. The contract I signed bound me to remain silent about the multifoliate personae phenomenon, except with certain people. The contract never stated my punishment for crossing Harman, but I am no fool. Harman Smith is a professional killer. I know what will happen. Perhaps I am a slave to my greed for knowledge. Whatever the consequences, though, I could not neglect these phenomena as a scientist. Future generations must receive some record of the strange power of Harman Smith. I only want the public to know, as much as I can, I have revealed the truth. Graham McAllister. The document printed above was found on Dr. McAllister's body, which was found hanging from a noose. The doctor disappeared from his social and professional circles in 1975 because he was regarded as a delinquent by the medical community. He fervently proposed a psychological theory that was fundamentally delusional. In addition, an employee of the Union Hotel, where McAllister stayed, confirmed that McAllister showed exceptionally strange behavior. At times, he would shriek without reason. He showed symptoms of mental derangement. For these reasons, the police concluded that McAllister had committed suicide impulsively as a result of his mental illness. The document referred to in his article on the Multifoliate Personae phenomenon, which described details of the so-called remnant psyches, was never found. Now, how literally do you want to take this story is really up to you. As we're playing through the game, there is, a certain amount of mystery as to what exactly the Killer7 are. What are they doing when they're blorshing and transforming into other people? And this story seems to lay it out quite literally. Do you want to take this as canon? Well, it's really up to you. I mean, this book is written by Grasshopper Manufacturer and Suda. There is some question as to how relevant all the information is with the version of the story that made it in the game. Do you want to take all of the facts that are in this book as relating to the game itself, considering that the story in the game it was cut down, it was condensed. It's not exactly the original draft that Suda came up with, but it's interesting information nonetheless. And again, you can just decide how literally you want to take this story that we just read on Harman Smith's Multifoliate Personae phenomenon. We'll come back later on to read more stories from Hand and Killer7, and eventually we'll take a look at all of the images inside and read all the information, and just see how much it clears up and how many questions it may make on its own. But we'll be back another time for more from Hand in Killer7. I'll see you another time for that.